Here were the picks, by the way. We all took New England.
Okay.
Pete went with Atlanta, Dallas, Pittsburgh. So you were 3-1.
Mm-hmm.
Josh went with Atlanta, Green Bay, Pittsburgh, New England. A 4.
Oh, way to go, Josh.
0 run for Josh. I went with Seattle, Green Bay, Kansas City, New England. So that's a 2-2 day for me. And KC Joyner, Atlanta, Dallas, Pittsburgh, New England. 3-1 for Casey. He joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. So let's start with the Dallas Green Bay, which was probably one of the more entertaining recent games. You know, Casey, you look at what Dallas did all season long. You know, they ran the ball. They didn't have a great defense. I think in the end, they got away from running the ball. They didn't play great defense, and they're sitting home because they just simply were not a complete football team yet. That's a team that's still a work in progress.
They are, absolutely. And you're right that they were running the football effectively, but they weren't dominant running the football, and they were leaning too much on the passing game. Well, part of it is Green Bay was making them, putting them in game situations where they needed to lean more on their passing game. So I think that was part of it, to where you could expect the running game to protect the defense only so much. Eventually, the defense is going to have to hold up on its own, and that's where those kind of limitations tend to show up, and Aaron Rodgers will make them show up.
Give me your take on late game Dallas. They end up spiking the ball. They said, hey, we were trying to save some time. We want this to do the timeout. To you, is that a big difference in that game?
Yeah, it is. You want to save some time? You can't call 2 plays in the huddle. You can't get some kind of a play call done, and maybe take some kind of a pass play, maybe take some kind of a fade or some kind of an out or something of that nature. You can't get some kind of a play called. Well, it was 40-some-odd seconds. We're not talking like 15 seconds. We're talking they had a solid amount of time, and they're trying to set up for a field goal. So the idea that you needed to down the ball, that doesn't hold water. That's just them not being prepared situationally for what was where they were at.
You look back at that game, and there's a whole heck of a lot. But in the first half, you're seeing Aaron Rodgers play at maybe the highest level that you've seen him play.
Yeah, and again, doing it without Jordy Nelson. And you start looking at Rodgers' metrics. We started in the Week 12 game where he started playing a lot better, because earlier than that, the offense had kind of struggled. But if you look at that, he's got double-digit yards per attempt volumes to 4 different receivers. If you get in double-digit yards per attempt to one receiver and can get just good numbers from the other people, you're going to be challenging for top of the league. If you're getting double-digit yards per attempt to 4 receivers, and he had 8.9 yards per attempt to Devontae Adams. It's not like, the other guys were struggling badly. That's how good he is. You can say, oh, he's missing Nelson. Who cares? He's got 5 different people now that he can rack up elite numbers with. So even if Nelson's not out there, Rodgers is playing at that kind of a level.
Yeah, and, this is a team. Green Bay, you look at them. Of the 2 teams, let me ask you, of the 2, Green Bay, Dallas, who is a more complete 53-man roster?
More complete. It's tough because Green Bay had a banged-up secondary, but Green Bay can stop the run. They've been doing it. They've been a top 10 run defense and even better at points during the year all season long. And Dallas, as good as they can be on defense, I think they're just thinner on defense. And because Green Bay has more of a passing game, Green Bay can still effectively run the football. Their good blocking rate numbers they weren't that far behind Dallas. They're behind Dallas, but they weren't that far behind where you'd say, okay, hey, they're not going to be able to get an effective running game. And their passing game is just so much better, because with Dallas, it's pretty much, Beasley can catch dink and dunks, and so can Witten, and then and Bryant can go deep, but that's about it, whereas you've got 5 different receivers in Green Bay because of the way Rodgers is playing. So I think Rodgers, the way he plays, he gets more out of his 53 and can make them a better 53.
Okay, give us your take on the the Rodgers hookup to Cook on the last play. What happens there? Because there's so many times in that situation we always say, hey, you're playing a prevent. Why not play a regular defense? They rushed 3 on that last play, it looked like. How does Cook get open there?
Yeah, and the thing is that you rush 3 and you don't keep Rodgers in the pocket, and he wants to get outside of the pocket. You could at least take out, if you're going to do 3, take outside rush lanes, make him stay as close to the pocket as possible. Because once he got in the open, he talked about it after the game. He said, they said, what was the key? He said, well, I was just patient, and that's exactly what it was. He was patient. That's a long developing play for Cook to go all the way across the field and get to where he was 30 yards downfield. But Rodgers is the sort of quarterback, and it's a big difference between the great quarterbacks and maybe some of the great players in the league, is they will be patient rather than feel rushed, and Rodgers didn't feel rushed in any respect and had all the field. So the Cowboys just did the wrong thing in a number of ways on that last play.
Casey, Mike and I had a caller earlier that thought that the Cowboys got away from the run. Would you agree with that sentiment, or do the numbers bear out that they did get away from the run or didn't get away from the run?
They did get away from the run. They did throw the ball more often. But, again, I think that Green Bay got them into a mode where they had to get away from the run. That's the thing, though. When you get game situationally, the idea of when you have to get away from the run, you don't have, if you look at the numbers for a number of different ways, you don't have to get away from the run until the game starts to get a lot later. And yet I think Dallas decided once the game started to turn to shootout mode that we need to start passing the football. And that's the whole point, is that you don't have to necessarily put the team in a situation where they have to get away from it, where they think they have to get away from it. And that's where Dallas, again, where you look at it and go, you got away from what you do, and maybe you would have had to pass when the game gets really out of reach. But where it was, you didn't have to get away from the running game.
So where did Dallas lose this game?
Dallas lost this game because it doesn't have a secondary who could cover the Green Bay receivers. They couldn't keep the game from getting into a shootout. That's where Dallas lost this game, because they were effective running the football. You look at the good blocking rate yesterday; they were above their season average of good blocking rate. So they were getting good run blocking. It's just that the Green Bay got them out of that mode because Green Bay has so many great receivers. And there's not a secondary in the league right now, by the way, I think, though, that can stop the Packers offense. I think that when you get with the Packers offense, you're going to have to just assume you're going to have to get into a shootout. And Dallas just isn't set up to do that.
KC Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider. Let's go over to Kansas City. Classic Andy Reid game there. I mean, late in that game, your take?
Yeah, late in that game, it is a classic Andy Reid game, although I think it shows it's as much a problem for their defense, in that I don't want to say a problem for the defense, because the defense played well yesterday, but Kansas City played a type of game all year long where we're going to bend but not break, we're going to make some big plays, and we're going to win that way. And that bend but don't break mode, that only works for so long. Eventually you have to be able to break the other team. You can't just bend but not break, because, again, if you bend but not break and you give up 6 field goals and you've got an offense that doesn't put up many points, you get a problem. So I think a lot of that has to do with Kansas City only had a couple of ways that they could win that game, a couple of game pathways to win that game, and that game was not one of them.
Well, it's funny because I think, I picked Kansas City to win, and mainly because I think the people who went against Kansas City looked at the loss of Derek Johnson on defense and thought that would be a factor. That didn't seem – even though Bell got his, they didn't give up any touchdowns. You look back and see what was the failure of Kansas City. Their offense let them down. Yeah,
their offense big time let them down. They couldn't run the football, and Pittsburgh's been doing
They couldn't, or they didn't try.
Well, both, and that's funny because the idea that you're going to get into a passing mode against Pittsburgh, they were talking about last night. When you start looking at their secondary, Pittsburgh's got a lot of really good players and good young players in the secondary. They've got good pass rushers. You don't want to try and run the ball or pass the ball against that team, but Pittsburgh's run defense has been a lot better. I think it's one of the underrated things of this playoff so far is Pittsburgh's defense of the last 8 weeks. I wouldn't call it. You're not Houston, they're not an elite defense, but they're very good. You used to be. You think you could get into a shootout with Pittsburgh. You can't do that now. That defense isn't going to let you do it.
KC Joyner with us here on the Sports Bash as we break down the playoff weekend that was. Casey, real quick about the style of the game. Somebody asked me over the weekend, did they think that a Saturday night game and then 3 games on Sunday would be the way to go ratings-wise? Play a Saturday night game and then do a 1 o'clock, a 4 o'clock, and an 8 o'clock game. What would your reaction be to that?
I think the NFL should be thinking about it's whether one of the compacted games before, make them at 4 o'clock on Saturday and then make the 1 and 4 o'clock on Sunday. I think it is to compact the divisional playoff games as close as possible because, frankly, Tomlin had a point when he said on the plane on the way home that they've got a day and a half lead in front of us, and you want the number 1 seed to have an edge over whoever else they play. If they happen to get to the championship game, you'd like that, but a day and a half worth of extra prep time, that seems really unfair. So I think from a league balance perspective, from a competitive balance perspective, you don't want to separate the games by that much because it does give one team a lot more rest than the other team.
You also look at that game and the Pittsburgh offense in that game. Why were they not able to really get going? You look back, they had some big numbers but couldn't get in the end zone. So if you're looking forward, what could the Patriots learn from that game?
That Ben Roethlisberger will be impatient, that he'll try and force plays that aren't there. He's had a history of doing that through his career. He's gotten a lot better at it. When he was a rookie, he'd force all kinds of passes in the coverage. In fact, even in his first few years of his career, And once he got Haley there as his offensive coordinator, he stopped being quite so hell-bent for leather to go force passes. But last night, I mean, the play that got intercepted near the goal line where they had a look on the outside that Brown was on a one-on-one, and then they had a running play called and they audible out of it. Why do that? You've got it. When I saw that play and you see it get tipped in the air and get intercepted, you're thinking, why did you throw that? Didn't you guys learn from what the Seahawks did a couple years ago? When you've got the best running back in the league and you're on the 2-yard line, hand the ball off.
Talk with KC Joyner here in the Sports Bash. Let's go to the Saturday games, KC. And what was the big factor in the Falcons' win in your mind? And also, does that signal the end of Seattle as we know them?
The big factor in the Falcons' win is that they've been doing some metric research on the Falcons, and it turns out that they're not quite as Matt Ryan-centric as you might think. Because you look at their team and you go, wow, Matt Ryan, he's got phenomenal numbers. I mean, not just top-level numbers where he's leading the league, but you start looking at his consistency, and his consistency off the charts. But what it was for Seattle is you don't have Thomas, now Shed gets hurt, Sherman's not playing at that level. That defense is a secondary-centric defense. No matter how good they've got in their front seven, and they've got some really good players in their front seven, it's still a secondary-centric defense. And when you start getting players banged up, you start losing players, and you're relying on Jeremy Lane, who's been terrible in coverage for years, you're not going to beat Atlanta in that situation.
How about the Atlanta defense? Are they good enough to win a Super Bowl with that unit?
They are, but a lot of that has to do with Seattle's offensive line. Seattle's offensive line is just terrible, and Green Bay's offensive line is not terrible, and New England's isn't, and Pittsburgh is maybe the best in the league. I even think Pittsburgh could be as good as Dallas, maybe even better than Dallas, because case to make for it. So when you start looking at that going, okay, Atlanta's defense, you did well against an offensive line that's not very good. I want to see how they do against some offensive lines that are a lot better than that, because taking no credit away from them, that the competition level had something to do with how they played.
Yeah, that was a team that quite frankly, I could not buy into all year because of the defense. I thought their defense played fantastic. They were very active on Saturday. That was something that stood out to me. They were a very active, aggressive defense on Saturday. When I had seen them throughout the course of the regular, specifically in the game against Philadelphia, they looked terrible in that game defensively too. Their offense wasn't all that good. I just thought they had a bad day there, but defensively in that game and other times I had seen them is really where I thought they took a nice turn. They almost reminded me, Casey, of the year that the Colts won the Super Bowl, and they were horrible defensively. And then in the playoffs, Bob Sanders and that defense just all of a sudden out of nowhere carried them.
Yeah, he did that year. That was a fantastic year for them. But remember, when the Colts won the Super Bowl, they beat Rex Grossman in the Super Bowl. So you're gonna play Rex in the Super Bowl. You're gonna have a good chance, and none of the guys that they're gonna be facing from here on out are gonna be Rex Grossman. So again, their secondary is active, and their defense. I mean, Vic Beasley's been an impact player. They've got some players on defense who are impact players. But again, they're going to get Green Bay is going to force them to get no kind of shoot again. They've got five players they're going to have to cover. Especially imagine if Nelson comes back and he's reasonably close to full strength, or at least enough to make Atlanta have to worry about him. You're going to have at least five players that they're going to, Adams and Cobb, and now you've got Rodgers, and you've got Cook, and you've got Nelson now, and you can put Ty Montgomery out there if you want to. You can flex him out. I mean, that's insane that they've got to worry about that many people. Mind you, Green Bay's got to worry about the same thing. That might be a game where you score 70 points, but Atlanta's defense is going to have a huge challenge in this contest.
How about the AFC, Casey? Any concern from the Patriots win? Did Houston give Pittsburgh any roadmap or blueprint for this week?
Yeah, that Tom Brady's going to throw up more passes that you would. He threw up risky passes or a lot of, I won't say prayer passes, but there were passes where he was getting back there and saying, because they couldn't get it done schematically, so he was just, okay, I'm going to throw this pass up there and hope my receiver goes and catches it. And he got a number of those completions on vertical passes, and that was a good thing for them. But it showed that you can get a pass rush against Tom Brady. You can get pressure in his face. He will start to force passes. They can't quite lean on the running game like they have in past years. They've got a good run-blocking offense, but it's not a great run-blocking offense. I'm looking at the matchup with Pittsburgh going, Pittsburgh's run defense can stop him. Pittsburgh has an active secondary that can go pick off some of those airmail passes. If he starts to lob 50-50 balls up there, they might go get some of those passes out of there. So they're going to have to play a whole lot better to beat Pittsburgh.
If Houston gets a better quarterback, is that team a Super Bowl contender?
you put any of these, imagine putting any of these quarterbacks on that team. I mean, imagine if you're putting Matt Ryan, as good as he is, and you can just think of Matt Ryan for a second, put Matt Ryan in Houston, say, okay, well, now he's got Nuke and he's got Fuller, and you know, he's got a very good run blocking offense, and they got that kind of a defense. Yeah, that's absolutely a Super Bowl caliber team. Osweiler and that whole quarterback situation is the one thing that's keeping Houston from there, but I don't know where they're going to solve that problem. But yeah, it's the one thing that, because they could have won that game if they even had mediocre quarterback play, but instead they had abysmal quarterback play.
Horrible play from Osweiler. And I said the only way I saw them, Green Bay, New England winning that game, or losing that game, was if Brady was historically bad. Well, for him, he was historically bad. I mean, for him, he had 2 picks, a 48 rating yesterday, on Saturday. That was a historically bad game for Brady, and they still doubled him up.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that going to that game, people were like, I've said a few people that Houston's defense can do something against New England, and people were like, no, there's no way that can happen. And it's not, you know, New England's got a really good offense, but they do have some weaknesses. Again, you look at that team and go, where's their vertical threat? I know Hogan's pretty good and all that, and Edelman's a better vertical threat for a dink and dunk passer than most dink and dunk passers, but you're still looking at that going, all right, if you look at Pittsburgh, you've got Brown and you've got a couple other players who can be considered to be vertical threats. I just don't see anybody on New England, although, again, Brady led the league of vertical yards per attempt, so he's making things happen with these less than stellar vertical receivers, but I wonder if eventually that's going to catch up to you. I don't know if any of these defenses that are left that can really keep him, make him look like he did on Saturday night, but if he even plays at a, say, B level instead of an A level, that might be enough given the power of the offenses left that New England might not win the Super Bowl.
The guys will have Casey on later in the week as Pete and Josh in for me on Friday. Casey will be back to break down the championship game matchups, and of course, we have those games right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, pal. Have a good one.
Appreciate it, guys.